5th of June 1984. It had been exactly 1,000 days of terror in Punjab from the day journalist Jagat Narayan was murdered on the highway on the 9th of September 1981. The Indian Army entered the Golden Temple to restore its sanctity. Major General Kuldeep Singh Brar, Divisional Commander, committed to the operations in the Golden Temple complex at Amritsar, describes the sequence of the actual operations in the site.
Important features on this enlargement: Jallianwala Bagh, Hotel Temple View, Akhada, observation towers, langar, water tank, Guru Ramdas Sarai, SGPC office, Guru Nanak Niwas, Baba Atal Gurdwara, Manji Sahib, the walls enclosing the main Golden Temple complex, Parikrama all around the Sarovar itself, Harmandir Sahib, which is the main sanctum sanctorium of this complex, Akal Takht, which was the headquarters of Bhindranwala and all the extremists. As far as the extremists are concerned, the layout of their defenses were extremely well planned. They made very skillful use of ground. They made very skillful use of their firepower, and they sited their defenses in such a way that they brought down effective fire on us, not only within the Golden Temple complex, but even in the approaches towards the Golden Temple complex. On the periphery, you see a large number of houses. These houses, about 20 of them in number, 3-storied, in some cases 4-storied, were occupied by the extremists. Not only did these houses give them early warning, but also extremely good observation, and they were able to bring down fire on us when any troops approached the Golden Temple complex. In addition, for early warning, good observation and attrition, they used the water tank as well as these observation towers, which were totally dominating the entire area. The main entrance, which is shown here, also had 2 very dominating buildings on both sides, and any movement towards the main entrance came under heavy fire from both these buildings, in addition to the main wall itself. This gate on the opposite side was similar to the main entrance and played a similar role on the southern flank. I had also information that the extremists with explosives had planned to blow up the Akal Takht and, if necessary, Harmandir Sahib, if they felt at some stage the game was up and they wished to discredit the army and the government of India, so that world over they would be able to project an image that the Akal Takht and the Harmandir Sahib had been blown up. I had tasked a team of commandos to get into the Akal Takht and defuse any explosive systems that they could come across, so that such an situation doesn't arise. I had infantry tasked to get in from the main entrance and fan out on both sides and get a foothold onto the northern extremity. I also had infantry to break in from the eastern gate and start moving them their way towards the Akal Takht and secure the southern flank. Whereas, as I said earlier, the commandos were to dash in and carry out their job in the Akal Takht. That the fortifications were so heavy and the fire so much that I started suffering very heavy casualties on the Parikrama.
walls and buildings, some of them three-storied, were occupied on rooftops, the third floor, the second floor, the first floor, as well as the ground floor. They had openings in the walls. They had certain underground shelters or manholes. They emerged from these manholes, fired away at us, got back into these manholes, which were interconnected by tunnels and underground shelters, and appeared elsewhere. So as you can see, the design of battle was initially to take us on from the periphery.
The extremists who were sitting on top, on the first floor and the roof floor, my infantry which was moving directly below them, came under grenades. And these were very lethal grenades, a large number of which had been constructed by them in a grenade factory, very innocuously located on top of the eastern gate. So grenades were being hurled down, whereas automatic fire and rifle fire was being directed on my troops who were coming on into this area. The commandos who had rushed and suffered casualties during their rush had been able to get on to this particular spot near Nisan Sahib. They came now under very heavy fire from Harmandir Sahib, from the Akal Takht, and from the buildings across. And I suffered heavy commando casualties. Nonetheless, a stage did come towards about 2 o'clock or so in the morning of the 6th, by which time I had managed a foothold on the northern enclosure as well as on the southern enclosure. We were able to surround the SGPC office, and having entered, Mr. Longowal and Mr. Tora gave themselves up. At this stage, I was getting repeated requests from my subunit commanders and my battalion commanders asking for permission to return fire on Akal Takht and Harmandir Sahib because they were coming under very heavy fire from both these places. As far as Harmandir Sahib is concerned, I had to veto this request and pass a very difficult order that under no circumstances will any fire be directed at Harmandir Sahib. With the result that I had to suffer many more casualties than I could have otherwise suffered. As far as the Akal Takht is concerned, there was no possibility of even closing into Akal Takht because now the volume of fire that was brought down on us was an undescribable volume of fire. I was therefore left with no other option but to start engaging those firing positions from which my troops were under very effective fire. And it was at this stage, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, that I brought in an APC, an armored personal carrier, Scott, wheeled, not tracked, onto the parikrama and drove it up to an area somewhere close to the southern gate, in the hope that psychologically this would have an effect and break the will of the terrorists in continuing this fight any further. Out of the 90 commandos which went into this particular point, 46 were casualties. And yet the restrictions were that you will not return fire on Harmandir Sahib. The APC, having got into this position, was knocked out by an anti-tank weapon fired from the Akal Takht within minutes of its arrival. It was now necessary for me, for psychological reasons, to bring one tank forward and the next one slightly ahead. I did use my medium machine guns against him, and about 30 of my boys were able to get into the Akal Takht. Some of my men got charred in this fire that had now engulfed this area. Therefore, I had to pull out some of my charred men and wounded men and get onto these two flanks on the southern side as well as the northern side and engage the Akal Takht with fire while I brought in certain more reinforcements. We were at a certain stage in the early hours of the 6th morning left with no other option but to use our direct firing weapons against the Akal Takht. At that stage, I suddenly found a large fire and smoke as though something had been set afire inside the Akal Takht. There was then a series of explosions. Perhaps the ammunition and the explosives were going off. With these explosions, portions of the Akal Takht started crumbling down, and therefore, as you can see for yourself, although some damage to the Akal Takht has been caused by our action, most of the damage has been caused by the extremists' own action. At that stage, we saw two men move in this particular area who were obviously wounded. We got hold of this chap and put him under arrest. We said, "Where are the rest?" He says, "They're dead." We said, "Where is Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale?" He said, "He's dead." During the rest of that night, we picked up their dead bodies, a large number of our dead bodies, some of their wounded who we couldn't extricate earlier, some of our own wounded, and during the early hours of the 7th, we were carrying out the various formalities as far as dead bodies and wounded is concerned. We kept Mr. Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale's body on a slab of ice till such time his brother, who was a Subedar Major in 61 Engineer Regiment, came down to identify the body. The 7th, midday, I was quite sure now that I was in complete control of the area of the Golden Temple. We are an apolitical army. It's immaterial to us whether it's the Congress or the Lok Dal or the Janta in power. We are totally apolitical. We are multi-religious. Whether we are Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, Muslims, all our soldiers are God-fearing religious men, and they respect each other's religions.
The terrorists had the guidance and professional advice of a disgruntled one-time general, Shubeg Singh, who had been charge-sheeted for corruption.